The morning started like any other Tuesday at Manchester Children's Hospital. Nurses walked quickly through the hallways carrying medicine and charts. Doctors checked on their young patients with tired but caring eyes. Children's laughter mixed with occasional tears echoed from the playrooms. Nobody knew that this ordinary day was about to become extraordinary. At exactly 9:30 in the morning, 3 black cars pulled up outside the main entrance. The hospital security guard, Robert, looked through the window and felt confused. These were not the usual delivery trucks or family cars he saw every day. These vehicles looked important and official. He called his supervisor to ask what was happening. Inside the hospital, head nurse Margaret was doing her morning rounds when her phone buzzed. The message made her stop walking immediately. 2 very special visitors were about to arrive, and they were not following the usual royal visit rules. There would be no red carpets, no formal ceremonies, and no long list of people to meet in a specific order. The automatic doors opened, and Prince William stepped inside first. He was not wearing his usual formal suit or military uniform. Instead, he had on a simple navy blue jacket and comfortable pants. He looked like any father who might be visiting his child in the hospital. Behind him came Kate, dressed in a soft blue sweater and dark jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a small bag over her shoulder. What struck everyone immediately was how relaxed they both looked. Royal visits usually meant strict schedules, nervous staff, and formal handshakes. But William and Kate walked in like they were visiting friends. They smiled genuinely at the receptionist, thanked the security guard, and asked the cleaning lady how her day was going. Dr. Patricia Williams, who had worked at the hospital for 12 years, watched from the nurse's station. She had seen many important people visit the hospital before. Politicians came for photo opportunities, celebrities arrived with camera crews, and business leaders brought big donation checks. But something felt different about this visit. These 2 people seemed truly interested in being there. Kate noticed a young boy in a wheelchair near the waiting area. His mother looked worried and tired. Without being asked or guided by hospital staff, Kate walked over and knelt down to the boy's eye level. She asked his name and what his favorite cartoon character was. The boy, who had been quiet and sad, suddenly started talking excitedly about superheroes. Meanwhile, William was talking to the hospital janitor, asking about his work and if he enjoyed working with children. The janitor, surprised that a prince cared about his opinion, started sharing stories about how the children always made him smile even on difficult days. The hospital staff watched in amazement. Usually, important visitors needed to be guided everywhere and told what to do. But William and Kate seemed to find their own way to connect with people. They were not following any script or schedule. They were simply being kind human beings. Nurse Margaret realized that something special was happening. She had prepared for a formal royal visit, but was witnessing something much more meaningful. These were not just royal duties being performed. This was genuine care and interest in the people around them. As they moved deeper into the hospital, word spread quietly among the staff. The prince and princess were not here for photographs or publicity. They had come to spend real time with the children and families who needed support the most. The formal visit had become something personal and heartfelt. The children's ward, usually filled with the sounds of medical equipment and quiet conversations, was about to experience something magical. 2 people who could have been anywhere in the world had chosen to be right here, ready to bring comfort and joy to those who needed it most. This unexpected visit was just beginning, and already everyone could feel that this day would be remembered forever. The children's cancer ward on the 3rd floor was usually quiet in the morning. Most of the young patients were still tired from their treatments the night before. But today felt different. 7-year-old Emma Collins sat in her hospital bed with crayons scattered around her like colorful confetti. She had been awake since 6 in the morning, working on something very special. Emma had been fighting leukemia for 8 months. Her once long brown hair had fallen out from the medicine, but she wore a bright pink hat that her grandmother had knitted for her. Despite being sick, Emma's eyes still sparkled with hope and curiosity. She was the kind of child who made everyone around her smile, even on the hardest days. For weeks, Emma had been drawing pictures of princesses and castles. She kept them in a special folder under her pillow. Her mother, Sarah, often found her daughter coloring late at night when she could not sleep because of the pain. Emma always said the same thing when asked why she drew so many princesses. She hoped that someday a real princess would visit the hospital, and she wanted to have a present ready. When Nurse Julie came to check on Emma that morning, she found the little girl working extra hard on a new drawing. This one was different from the others. It showed a beautiful castle with towers reaching toward fluffy white clouds. In front of the castle stood a princess with a crown, and beside her was a prince. Both figures were smiling and holding hands with children. Emma looked up at Nurse Julie with excitement in her tired eyes. She had heard whispers in the hallway about special visitors coming to the hospital. Her heart was beating fast with hope that maybe, just maybe, her dream of meeting a real princess might come true today. At 10:15 in the morning, Emma heard footsteps in the hallway outside her room. They sounded different from the usual quick steps of doctors and nurses. These footsteps were slower, more gentle. Emma quickly hid her drawing under her blanket and pretended to be resting. The door to her room opened softly. Emma peeked through her eyelashes and saw two people entering. The man was tall with kind eyes and brown hair. The woman had long dark hair and the warmest smile Emma had ever seen. But what made Emma's heart almost stop was how the woman moved. She walked like someone very special, very important. Kate saw the little girl in the bed and immediately felt her heart fill with emotion. Something about Emma's brave little face reminded her of her own children at home. Without thinking about royal protocol or proper procedures, Kate walked directly to Emma's bedside. Emma could not believe what was happening. She sat up slowly, her pink hat slightly crooked on her head. With a voice barely louder than a whisper, she asked the question that had been in her dreams for months. "Are you really a princess?" Kate's eyes filled with tears as she looked at this brave little girl. She nodded gently and said yes, but more importantly, she wanted to know Emma's name and hear about her drawings. Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. She reached under her blanket and pulled out her special folder. William, who had been standing quietly by the door, came closer to see what Emma wanted to show them. When she opened the folder, dozens of princess drawings spilled out onto the bed. Each one was carefully colored and showed scenes of happiness and hope. Kate asked if she could sit on the bed next to Emma. The little girl nodded eagerly and moved over to make room. For the next few minutes, Emma showed Kate every single drawing, explaining the story behind each castle and princess. Kate listened to every word, as if it was the most important story she had ever heard. Then something magical happened. Kate asked Emma if they could color together. She picked up a crayon and started adding details to Emma's newest castle drawing. William sat down on the floor beside the bed and began making funny voices for the toy animals on Emma's bedside table. The room filled with laughter and joy. Emma forgot about being sick. Kate forgot about being a princess. William forgot about being a future king. For these precious moments, they were simply three people sharing crayons and creating something beautiful together. The hospital had rules that everyone followed strictly. Visitors could only stay for 30 minutes in patient rooms. Important guests were supposed to move through the hospital quickly, meeting people briefly before going to the next scheduled stop. But Prince William and Kate seemed to have forgotten all about schedules and rules. In room 304, 8-year-old James Patterson was struggling with his daily physical therapy exercises. 3 weeks earlier, James had been in a terrible car accident that hurt his legs badly. The doctors said he would walk again, but it would take many months of hard work and painful exercises. James was getting frustrated and did not want to try anymore. His physical therapist, Maria Santos, was trying to encourage James to move his legs when she heard voices in the hallway. She knew that special visitors were in the hospital today, but she did not expect them to come to the rehabilitation room. Most important people preferred to visit patients who were getting better, not children who were struggling with difficult therapy. James was lying on the exercise mat, refusing to lift his legs. He had been crying earlier because the exercises hurt so much. When he saw two strangers enter his room, he turned his face away and pulled his blanket over his head. He did not want anyone to see him being weak. William looked at the little boy hiding under his blanket and immediately understood. He remembered being young and feeling embarrassed when he could not do something that seemed easy for other people. Without asking permission from anyone, William took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. What happened next surprised everyone in the room. The future King of England got down on the floor next to James and asked if he could help with the exercises. James peeked out from under his blanket, curious about why this important-looking man wanted to lie on the floor with him. William started doing the same leg exercises that James was supposed to do. He made funny faces when he lifted his legs, pretending that it was very difficult for him too. Soon James was giggling and trying to copy William's silly expressions. Before anyone realized it, James was doing his exercises without complaining. Meanwhile, Kate had wandered into the next room, where several children were having trouble sleeping. The afternoon rest time was always difficult for sick children because their minds were full of worries and their bodies were uncomfortable from treatments. Nurse Patricia was reading a story to help them relax, but most of the children were still wide awake. Kate asked Nurse Patricia if she could help with story time. She sat down in the circle with 5 children aged 4 to 9 years old. Instead of reading from a book, Kate began telling a story from her memory about a brave dragon who was actually very kind and gentle. But Kate did not just tell the story in a normal voice. She changed her voice for each character in the tale. When she spoke for the dragon, her voice became deep and growly. When she was the little princess in the story, her voice became high and sweet. The children were fascinated and began to laugh at her funny character voices. Soon the children were so relaxed and happy that they started falling asleep one by one. Kate continued her story in a softer voice until all 5 children were sleeping peacefully. Nurse Patricia had never seen the children fall asleep so easily during rest time. Back in James's room, William was still on the floor helping with exercises. He had been there for over an hour, much longer than any royal visit was supposed to last. But William did not seem to care about time or schedules. He was focused completely on helping James feel confident about his therapy. The hospital staff watched in amazement. These were not just royal duties being performed for cameras or publicity. This was genuine care and love being given freely to children who needed it most. William and Kate had broken every rule about how royal visits were supposed to work, and in doing so, they had created something much more meaningful than any formal ceremony could ever be. The intensive care unit was the quietest part of the hospital. Here, the sickest children fought for their lives with machines helping them breathe and monitors showing their heartbeats. Families lived in constant fear, hoping and praying for their little ones to get better. It was a place where miracles and heartbreak happened every single day. Mark and Lisa Thompson had not left the hospital in 5 days. Their 6-month-old baby daughter, Sarah, was fighting a serious infection that had attacked her tiny body. The doctors were doing everything they could, but Sarah was so small and so sick that nobody knew if she would survive. Lisa had not eaten a proper meal or slept for more than an hour at a time since Sarah was admitted. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands shook from exhaustion and worry. Mark tried to be strong for his wife and daughter, but inside he felt helpless and scared. They both felt completely alone in their fear. The intensive care unit had strict rules about visitors. Only immediate family members were allowed, and they had to wear special gowns and masks to protect the sick babies from germs. When Lisa heard that important visitors were in the hospital, she did not think they would come to this section. Important people usually avoided the saddest parts of hospitals. But William and Kate were not like other important visitors. They had specifically asked to visit the children who were most sick, even though their security team and hospital officials had tried to discourage them. They knew that the families in intensive care needed support more than anyone else. Lisa was standing in the hallway outside Sarah's room, crying quietly so other families would not hear her. She had just spoken to the doctor who told her that Sarah's condition had not improved overnight. Lisa felt like her world was falling apart, and she did not know how to keep being strong. Kate was walking through the intensive care unit when she saw Lisa crying alone in the hallway. Every motherly instinct in Kate's heart told her to help this woman who was clearly in terrible pain. Kate did not think about royal protocol or proper procedures. She simply saw another mother who needed comfort. Without saying a word, Kate walked up to Lisa and gently put her arms around her. Lisa was surprised at first, but then she collapsed into Kate's embrace and cried harder than she had cried since Sarah got sick. Kate held her tightly and let her cry for as long as she needed to. For several minutes, they stood together in the hallway. Kate did not try to say words that would make everything better, because she knew that no words could fix what Lisa was going through. Instead, she simply offered the comfort of one mother's arms around another mother's shoulders. Mark was sitting beside Sarah's bed when he saw his wife being comforted by a woman he recognized from television. He felt confused and grateful at the same time. When William appeared in the doorway of Sarah's room, Mark stood up quickly, not knowing what he should do or say. William looked at tiny baby Sarah, connected to tubes and wires that were helping her stay alive. His own children were healthy and safe at home, and seeing Sarah made him realize how blessed his family was. He also thought about how terrifying it must be for Mark and Lisa to watch their baby fight for her life. William sat down in the chair next to Mark and asked about Sarah. Mark began talking about his daughter, how she loved to smile before she got sick, and how she would grab his finger with her tiny hand. As Mark talked, his voice broke with emotion, and tears started falling down his face. For the next hour, William and Kate stayed with Mark and Lisa in the intensive care unit. They were not there as prince and princess, but as fellow parents who understood the deep love and fear that comes with having children. They talked about sleepless nights, first smiles, and the overwhelming responsibility of protecting someone so small and precious. When it was time for them to leave Sarah's room, Kate gently touched the baby's tiny hand through the incubator and whispered a quiet prayer. No cameras captured this moment, and no reporters wrote about it, but everyone in that room knew they had witnessed something sacred and beautiful. Dr. Elena Martinez had worked at Manchester Children's Hospital for 15 years. She had seen politicians come for photo opportunities, celebrities arrive with camera crews, and business leaders bring large donation checks for publicity. But she had never seen anything like what was happening today with Prince William and Kate. Usually when important people visited hospitals, the staff had to follow strict rules. They were told to stand in specific places, speak only when spoken to, and keep their interactions brief and formal. The visits felt more like performances than genuine meetings between human beings. But today felt completely different. William and Kate were not following any script or schedule. They seemed genuinely interested in talking to everyone they met, from the head doctors to the people who cleaned the floors. They asked real questions and listened carefully to the answers. In the staff break room, a small space with old furniture and a coffee machine that barely worked, something extraordinary was happening. Kate had asked if she could sit with the hospital workers during their afternoon break. She wanted to know about their lives, their families, and how they managed to do such emotionally difficult work every day. Joe Henderson, who had been cleaning the hospital floors for 12 years, could not believe he was sharing tea and biscuits with a future queen. Joe was a quiet man who usually kept to himself, but Kate's genuine interest in his life made him feel comfortable enough to talk openly. Joe told Kate about his 4 grandchildren and how he loved his job because the sick children always found ways to make him smile. He shared stories about kids who drew him pictures, thanked him for keeping their rooms clean, and asked about his family. Kate listened to every word, as if Joe's stories were the most fascinating things she had ever heard. Meanwhile, William was talking with Patricia Coleman, a nurse who had been working in the children's cancer ward for 8 years. Patricia was usually professional and reserved with visitors, but William's relaxed manner made her feel like she was talking to a friend rather than a future king. Patricia began sharing her struggles with caring for her elderly mother while working long shifts at the hospital. She talked about feeling guilty when she could not spend enough time at home and worrying about her mother's health while she was at work caring for other people's children. William listened with complete attention and asked thoughtful questions about Patricia's situation. He did not offer simple solutions or empty comfort words. Instead, he acknowledged how difficult it must be to balance caring for sick children at work with worrying about family at home. Dr. Martinez watched these conversations from across the break room and felt amazed. She had prepared talking points about hospital statistics and treatment success rates, expecting formal questions about medical procedures. Instead, she found herself in a genuine conversation about the emotional challenges of working with sick children. Kate asked Dr. Martinez about her own family and how she dealt with the sadness of losing young patients. Dr. Martinez found herself sharing feelings she rarely talked about with anyone, including her own family. She spoke about the nights when she went home and cried for children she could not save, and the joy she felt when treatments worked and families could go home healthy. The maintenance supervisor, Tom Walsh, was surprised when William asked detailed questions about keeping a hospital clean and safe for sick children. Tom had expected to be ignored or dismissed, but instead found himself explaining the important work his team did to prevent infections and create a healing environment. As the afternoon continued, something beautiful was happening throughout the hospital. The usual barriers between important visitors and working staff were disappearing. Conversations were becoming more personal and meaningful. People who normally felt invisible during official visits were being seen and heard. The cleaning ladies shared stories about children who remembered their names and asked about their families. The security guards talked about feeling protective of the young patients and their worried parents. The kitchen staff described how they tried to make special meals for children who had lost their appetites due to treatments. By the end of their break time, the hospital staff felt something they had never experienced during an official visit. They felt valued and appreciated not just for their professional skills, but for their humanity and compassion. William and Kate had shown them that their work mattered deeply and that they were essential parts of the healing process. Word spread quickly through the hospital about how the royal couple was treating everyone with such genuine respect and interest. Workers who had not met them yet began hoping they would have a chance to share their own stories and experiences. As the afternoon sun began to set, William and Kate had been at the hospital for almost 6 hours. Their original schedule had called for a 2-hour visit with formal meetings and photo opportunities. Instead, they had spent the entire day moving from room to room, talking with children, comforting families, and connecting with hospital staff. Director Michael Roberts had been working in hospital administration for 20 years. He had organized dozens of official visits from government officials, celebrities, and business leaders. Usually, these visits followed predictable patterns with scheduled meetings, prepared speeches, and requests for publicity photos. But today had been completely different from any visit he had ever managed. William and Kate had ignored their official schedule completely, choosing instead to spend real time with the people who needed support most. Director Roberts felt both impressed and slightly worried about how unusual this visit had become. As the royal couple prepared to leave, Director Roberts expected them to make polite goodbye comments and promise to remember their visit. Instead, William asked if they could speak privately in his office. Kate joined them, and they closed the door for a conversation that would surprise everyone. William began by thanking Director Roberts for allowing them to spend genuine time with the children and families. But then he said something that made the director sit forward in his chair with surprise. William and Kate wanted to make a personal donation to upgrade the children's play area, and they insisted that the donation be made anonymously. Director Roberts had received many donations during his career, but most benefactors wanted recognition for their generosity. They wanted their names on plaques, mentions in newspapers, and credit for their charitable giving. But William and Kate specifically requested that their donation remain completely private. Kate explained that they had noticed the children's play area needed new toys, books, and furniture. She had seen children trying to play with broken games and torn books. The play area was clearly a place where children found joy and distraction from their medical treatments, but it needed resources to serve them better. The amount of their personal donation shocked Director Roberts. It was enough to completely transform the play area and purchase new equipment for several patient rooms. This was not money from royal charitable funds or official palace accounts. This was William and Kate's own money, given from their personal savings. But the surprises were not finished. Kate then asked about the possibility of making regular visits to the hospital, not as official royal duties, but as volunteers who genuinely cared about the children's well-being. She wanted to know if they could come back quietly, without media attention or formal ceremonies. Director Roberts had never received such a request from any important person. Usually, official visitors wanted maximum publicity for their charitable activities. They brought photographers, invited journalists, and made sure their good deeds were widely reported. But William and Kate were asking for the opposite. They wanted to help without any recognition or attention. William explained that their day at the hospital had affected them deeply. They had met children and families facing incredible challenges with courage and hope. They had seen hospital staff working with dedication and compassion despite difficult conditions. They wanted to continue supporting this community, but only if they could do so in a meaningful way. Kate added that she wanted to bring her own children to visit when they were old enough to understand. She believed that Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis should learn about helping others by seeing real examples of courage and kindness. The hospital could be a place where her family learned important lessons about compassion and service. Director Roberts realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in his experience. These were not just wealthy people making charitable donations for tax benefits or public recognition. These were genuinely caring individuals who had been moved by what they had seen and wanted to make a real difference in children's lives. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes as they discussed practical details about future visits and how the play area improvements could be implemented. William and Kate asked thoughtful questions about the hospital's greatest needs and how they could help address them effectively. When the meeting ended, Director Roberts felt like he had participated in something historic. He had just arranged ongoing support from two people who could choose to spend their time anywhere in the world, but had decided to dedicate part of their lives to helping sick children and their families. As William and Kate prepared to finally leave the hospital, Director Roberts knew that this day had changed not just the children and families they had met, but also the future of the hospital itself. Their unexpected generosity and genuine commitment would create improvements that would benefit countless children for years to come. The days following William and Kate's visit brought changes that nobody at Manchester Children's Hospital had expected. Word of their genuine compassion and personal connection with patients had spread quietly through the hospital community, then to other hospitals, and eventually across the entire country. But it was not the official press release that moved people's hearts. The Royal Communications Office had published a brief, formal statement about the visit, mentioning the importance of supporting children's health care. However, the real impact came from personal stories shared by families, staff members, and children who had experienced something extraordinary. Emma's mother, Sarah Collins, could not stop talking to other parents about what had happened in her daughter's room. She described how Kate had spent almost an hour coloring with Emma, asking about each drawing and listening to every story with genuine interest. Sarah shared how Kate had given Emma a personal phone number to call if she ever felt scared or lonely during treatments. The personal phone number was not a publicity stunt or empty gesture. 3 days after the visit, Emma had called the number during a particularly difficult night when her treatment was making her feel very sick. Kate had answered the phone herself and talked with Emma for 15 minutes, helping her feel brave and reminding her that she was stronger than her illness. James Patterson's father, Robert, told everyone who would listen about how the future King of England had spent over an hour lying on the floor doing physical therapy exercises. Robert described William's patience and encouragement, and how James had completed his most successful therapy session ever because a prince had made the exercises seem fun instead of painful. The story that touched people most deeply came from Mark and Lisa Thompson, whose baby Sarah was still fighting for her life in intensive care. They shared how Kate had held Lisa while she cried, and how William had sat with Mark for an hour, talking about the fears and joys of being parents. These personal stories began spreading through social media, not as celebrity gossip, but as examples of genuine human kindness. Parents dealing with their own children's illnesses found hope in knowing that even royalty understood their struggles. Hospital workers across the country felt validated and appreciated when they heard how William and Kate had spent time thanking staff members for their dedication. Dr. Martinez received phone calls from colleagues at other hospitals asking if the stories were really true. When she confirmed that William and Kate had indeed spent an entire day genuinely connecting with children and families, other medical professionals began talking about the importance of compassion in healthcare. The ripple effect extended far beyond the medical community. Teachers began sharing the story with their students as an example of true leadership and service to others. Parents used William and Kate's visit as a teaching moment to discuss empathy and helping people who are facing difficult challenges. Local volunteer organizations noticed an increase in applications from people who said they were inspired by the royal couple's example. The Manchester Children's Hospital volunteer coordinator, Jane Williams, reported receiving over 200 new volunteer applications in the week following the visit. Many of the new volunteers specifically mentioned that they wanted to spend time with sick children because they had heard about how much joy and comfort simple human connection could provide. People who had never considered hospital volunteering began signing up for training programs to work with pediatric patients. Donations to children's hospitals across the country increased significantly, but these were not large corporate contributions seeking publicity. Instead, they were smaller donations from ordinary families who wanted to help after hearing about the children William and Kate had met. Emma's story particularly inspired other young patients. Children in hospitals throughout England began drawing pictures and writing letters, hoping to share their artwork with other brave kids who were fighting serious illnesses. A network of young patients began supporting each other through shared creativity and encouragement. The hospital's social worker, Amanda Foster, noticed that families seemed more hopeful and connected to each other in the weeks following the visit. Parents who had been isolated in their worry began reaching out to other families, creating support networks that helped everyone cope with the stress of having sick children. Even the hospital staff noticed positive changes in their workplace environment. The validation and appreciation they had received from William and Kate seemed to remind everyone of the important work they were doing. Morale improved, teamwork became stronger, and the overall atmosphere in the hospital felt more positive and supportive. News outlets began reporting on the broader impact of the visit, noting how one day of genuine compassion had created waves of kindness and generosity throughout the community. The story became an example of how authentic leadership could inspire others to take positive action in their own lives. 3 weeks after their first visit, on a quiet Saturday morning in early November, something remarkable happened at Manchester Children's Hospital. At exactly 8:30 in the morning, a simple blue car pulled into the hospital parking area. No security escort, no official vehicles, and no advance notice to hospital administration. William stepped out of the driver's seat wearing jeans and a casual sweater. Kate emerged from the passenger side carrying 2 large bags and wearing the kind of comfortable clothes any mother might choose for a day of activities with children. They looked like any ordinary couple arriving to visit family members. The weekend security guard, David Chen, was surprised to see 2 familiar faces approaching the main entrance. He had been working at the hospital for 5 years and had seen many famous visitors, but none had ever arrived so quietly and casually on a weekend morning. Kate's bags contained something very special. Earlier that week, she had spent an entire afternoon in her kitchen with Prince George and Princess Charlotte, baking cookies for the children at the hospital. The royal children had helped measure ingredients, mix the dough, and carefully place each cookie on baking sheets. George, who was 8 years old, had insisted on making extra cookies for the children who might be too sick to eat regular food. Charlotte, who was 6, had wanted to decorate some cookies with colorful icing to make them look more cheerful. Both children had been excited to help create something that would bring joy to other kids who were not feeling well. The bags also contained handmade cards that George and Charlotte had created for specific children their parents had told them about. George had drawn a picture of a superhero for James, knowing that the boy was still working hard on his physical therapy. Charlotte had made a special card for Emma with drawings of princesses and castles. William and Kate had not told anyone at the hospital that they were coming. They wanted this visit to be completely private, with no photographers, no official schedules, and no formal meetings. They simply wanted to spend time with the children and families they had met 3 weeks earlier. When they reached the children's ward, Nurse Julie was the first staff member to see them. She was so surprised that she almost dropped the medicine tray she was carrying. She had been working at the hospital for 10 years and had never seen any important visitors return for an unofficial private visit. Their first stop was Emma's room. The brave little girl had finished her most recent round of chemotherapy and was preparing to go home the following week. Her cancer treatment had been successful, and her doctors were optimistic about her recovery. Emma was sitting up in bed, working on a new drawing when William and Kate appeared in her doorway. Emma's face lit up with pure joy when she saw them. She had been talking about their first visit every day, telling anyone who would listen about the princess who had colored with her and the prince who had made funny voices for her toy animals. Seeing them again felt like the best surprise she could imagine. Kate sat on Emma's bed and gave her the special cookies that George and Charlotte had helped make. Emma was amazed to learn that real prince and princess children had baked cookies just for her and the other kids in the hospital. Kate also gave Emma the decorated card from Charlotte, which made Emma giggle with happiness. Meanwhile, William went to find James in the physical therapy room. The 8-year-old boy had been making excellent progress with his exercises since their first meeting. His confidence had improved dramatically, and he was walking short distances with the help of support bars. When James saw William enter the therapy room, he immediately wanted to show off his improvement. With his physical therapist Maria watching proudly, James walked across the entire room using only one support rail. William cheered and clapped as if he was watching the most impressive athletic performance in the world. The royal couple spent the entire day moving quietly through the hospital, visiting children and families they had met during their first visit. They also took time to meet new patients who had been admitted since their previous visit. Each interaction was personal, genuine, and completely focused on bringing comfort and joy to children who needed it most. In the intensive care unit, they returned to see baby Sarah Thompson, who had made significant improvement in the 3 weeks since their first visit. Her parents Mark and Lisa were cautiously optimistic about her recovery, and seeing William and Kate again reminded them that they were not alone in their journey. What made this visit even more special was that no one outside the hospital knew it was happening. There were no reporters, no photographers, and no publicity. This was simply 2 caring people choosing to spend their Saturday bringing happiness to sick children and supporting worried families. By the time they left that evening, William and Kate had spent almost 10 hours at the hospital. They had shared homemade cookies, listened to stories, played games, and provided comfort to dozens of children and families. Most importantly, they had shown that their care and concern was genuine and lasting, not just a one-time publicity event. Nurse Patricia Coleman had been so moved by William's understanding of her struggles with caring for her elderly mother that she had started a support network for other hospital employees who were dealing with similar family challenges. The network provided practical advice and emotional support for workers trying to balance their demanding jobs with family responsibilities. The ripple effects had spread far beyond Manchester. Other hospitals across the country had reported increases in volunteer applications and donations after news of William and Kate's compassionate visit had spread. The story had become an example of how genuine leadership and authentic caring could inspire others to take positive action. Celebrity visits to hospitals had changed dramatically. After hearing about William and Kate's approach, other famous people began requesting private, low-key visits focused on spending real time with patients rather than creating publicity opportunities. Hospital administrators noted that these genuine visits were much more beneficial for children and families than formal ceremonial events. The volunteer coordinator at Manchester Children's Hospital, Jane Williams, had to create new training programs to accommodate the hundreds of people who wanted to volunteer after being inspired by the royal couple's example. Many of these new volunteers specifically requested assignments that would allow them to spend one-on-one time with children, similar to what they had witnessed William and Kate doing. Baby Sarah Thompson, whose life had been hanging in the balance during William and Kate's first visit, had made a complete recovery. Her parents Mark and Lisa had become advocates for other families dealing with seriously ill children. They regularly visited the intensive care unit to provide support and hope to parents who were experiencing the same fear and uncertainty they had faced. The most significant long-term change was in how people thought about service and leadership. William and Kate's visit had demonstrated that true leadership was not about power or position, but about seeing other people's pain and choosing to help heal it. Their example had inspired countless individuals to look for ways to serve their own communities with genuine compassion. Schools throughout England began teaching their students about the visit as an example of empathy and service to others. Teachers used the story to discuss how small acts of kindness could create large positive changes in the world. Children learned that making the difference did not require fame or fortune, just a caring heart and willingness to help. The legacy of that single day continued to grow and spread, proving that when people with influence choose to use their position to genuinely help others, the positive impact can last far beyond the original moment. William and Kate had shown that the most powerful thing anyone can do is simply be human, caring, and present for people who need support. Their visit had created waves of kindness that continued to spread months later, touching thousands of lives and inspiring a new understanding of what it truly means to serve others with love and compassion.